because I struggle to know myself, I let other people tell me what variables I should maximize on. And, it might be money, it might be status, it might be prestige, but it took me quite a while to realize those are not the variables I care about. I just wanted freedom. And in America, a lot of that meant having financial option, also having a career that gave you some sort of ability to build on it and turn it into just more options. I felt like I had to take advantage of opportunities. I think to your point, I think too much of it is not a good thing. I pretty much put myself on a fast track to burnout.
Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I couldn't be more excited to have this
So
conversation
we're
with
going
you
to get
today.
right kicked off, and I'm excited to talk about this because I heard you tell this story, and it really stood out to me about the kind of person that you are, an outside the box thinker, someone that really is thinking bigger than what most people do. And you were working for a hedge fund, a billionaire. You're handling all the things that level of intensity needs, and you don't get to that level without being a very, very special human. And there are good and bad attributes to that. Anything turned up too loud can be a little too difficult. But the billionaire you worked for ends up stuck in customs, and he's completely frustrated. And he says, "You got to figure this out. I need global access. I'm never doing this again. Figure it out. And I need you to paint a picture for our listeners of what you did because people won't believe this."
Right. So that was one of my early huge projects. And of course, I didn't even know it was going to be a huge project. My boss never flies not private, I shall say. And so he had taken this very last minute flying first class. He came back from London, got stuck at JFK in Customs and Border Patrol, the passport line, and he was waiting for hours and hours and hours. And so Monday morning, he tells me, this cannot happen again. I need global entry. But more than that, he doesn't have time to go to the government. He also doesn't want to wait. He wants the government to come to him and to come sort of immediately. So I had to then, this is I don't know how to get the government to move quickly and also come to him. Um, but I just, he said that someone from his family office may have some contacts or information or at least a name. And so called someone from his family office. She gave me a name and was just said nothing, but just call this guy. I called this guy. This guy is a US Customs Border Patrol agent. And, I prepared a little pitch about how we were this high performing hedge fund, global travelers. Getting us global entry would save us, so much time that we could then, put back into helping America be richer, basically. And
Yeah.
before I could even get my spiel out, he was like, "Sure, we'll come to you. We'll bring Border Patrol to you and help you get global entry." And so, yeah, so I organized this. Two of these agents came to our office, and it was, I think, just in a matter of a couple weeks. Anyone who has gotten global entry knows that the wait for conditional approval can take many, many months. And not only that, you usually have to go to an airport to be fingerprinted, to take your photo, and all of this was done in the convenience and efficiency of our work office. And so the detour that people had to take, everyone from my boss, including I signed up for global entry then as well, was just no longer than a trip to, like, let's say, go to the bathroom. It was just like in and out, in and out. And that just spoke to the level of a frictionless universe that I was expected to be able to make happen at that office and in his life.
So the level of intensity it takes to be a high performer, the kind of high performer that gets to billionaire status, right? You were around this from the time, I mean, even at MIT, you're around people that are so smart and so different from so many people that make up the rest of the universe, right? There's an intensity level though about those that get to that next level, those that that you're working for, that he didn't get there by not being highly intense. Did you find that the intensity that you matched it and you enjoyed that level of intensity, and it was almost like um a challenge, but you liked it up to a certain point? Or did you find that it was so not you that you needed to get away from it? What was the turning point in that matrix?
That is an incredible question because actually from the get-go, so in order to get this job, I went through 14 interviews. Um, I interviewed with everyone from his executive coach to his wife. They had to all talk to me and kind of be like, yes, this is the person. I also had something like 10 reference checks. And most of those reference checks, I didn't provide, I provided 2 or 3 names. They found the other people and said, we need to talk to these people the next day. Can you make this happen? So it was already immediately an extremely intense recruiting process. And then when I started, it just was an extremely intense job. And instead of questioning the intensity, I felt right at home. And like you said, because I double majored and minored and graduated at MIT in 3 years. I am used to intensity and I would say I felt very, very at home amongst high performers. And I think what drove certainly me, my boss, and from what I can tell, everyone else at the firm was just this constant drive for excellence. And not only that, uh, my boss's goal and my goal, because I've always kind of had this attitude, was not only to be the best, but the best in the world. And you're just not, there's kind of no plan B. You're just going to try and try and try. And if it, doesn't work, you just have to try again. And so I did feel that it just very much felt natural to me. And I think it comes from actually in my childhood, I think my parents are also super intense people. And that intensity, and I would also say the extremity by which my parents had lived life was because they had survived some really traumatic times during the tumultuous period of the Cultural Revolution in China. And having survived that and then immigrated to the United States, um, they just, were used to doing quite literally whatever it took to survive. So that mindset of just survival, where every second you is unpredictable and you just do whatever it takes to succeed, that just felt very natural to me because my parents were that way. They passed that on to me. And then that's why working at this firm also felt really, really natural.
It feels like I grew up with the same level of intensity, and I still have that level of intensity. And I think that sometimes I say this all the time, your greatest strength turned up too loud is your blind spot. And so for me, my give a shit factor is 1,000% at just about everything we do. And I mean, I've gone into restaurants and I want to change little tiny details about the restaurant. I want to like call the owner over and be like, hey, if you do this, this will be so impactful to everybody. I'm constantly trying to make things better. And that can also be a challenge, you know? And so when you grow up, and mine was, I think, very sports driven. We had a very sports driven mindset and very much a victor mentality, not a victim mentality. And so that was a very good seed to life. But I feel like you figured out that the end of this journey is burnout. That the end of
Yes.
this journey, if you don't understand how to self-regulate, and we talk about this on this podcast all the time, that the high performance life is about self-awareness, self-regulation, a it's really I'm stumbling on my words here because it's so powerful to just realize where you're at sometimes. And if you don't do that, you just let the journey take you wherever it ends up and you end up burnt out. Did you feel kind of the same way growing up and leading into this space?
When I was growing up, I really thought that I just needed to perform in order to, I think, give myself the freedom to escape the circumstances in which I grew up. I grew up when my parents first immigrated, they were graduate students, working multiple jobs, you know, as a my dad was a Domino's delivery person, my mom dishwasher, and babysitter, all these multiple jobs in order to just pay their out-of-state tuitions while, you know, giving themselves and me a chance at the American dream. Eventually we moved up to middle class, but I think the more economic struggles that we had early on really helped shaped my need for, I just wanted freedom. And in America, a lot of that meant having financial options
Right.
and also having a career that gave you some sort of ability to build on it and turn it into just more options. You know, I felt like I had to take advantage of opportunities that were given to me. But I think to your point, I think too much of it is not a good thing. I pretty much put myself on a fast track to burnout. And I also think that, you know, optimization. So I have a math degree. I've been obsessed with optimization my entire life, including from the mathematical side, but also in the life sense. And I remember I worked in quantitative equities right after college, and I was charged. One of my first projects was building the portfolio optimizer. So I was so just into this optimization mindset, and my thinking at the time, you know, in my early 20s was, well, why wouldn't you optimize everything? Why? Like it just was so, I just like couldn't fathom a world in which everyone was not optimizing all the time. You know, obviously I think there are problems with that, which is not to say optimization is good or bad, but again, it's too much of something might not work, you know, and I find my need to turn off my optimization brain when I write, for example, because I'm putting too much pressure on perfection before I even start. And the other thing with you know, too much of that intense and optimization mindset is that from a mathematical standpoint, optimization is all about having an objective. So it's usually maximizing or minimizing something. And then you have your decision variable. So these are the factors that you care about. Like, what are you trying to maximize or minimize? And then you have your constraints. And just thinking about it that way now, I just really think I believed in the value of optimization, but how how would I know what variables and decisions to maximize on? And without that self-knowledge, I struggle to know myself from a very early age. I think this also has to do with my childhood. Because I struggle to know myself, I let other people perhaps, or just external factors in society tell me what variables I should maximize on. And, you know, it might be money, it might be status, it might be prestige. Um, but it took me quite a while to realize those are not the variables I care about. So I had to literally just completely reset my optimization equation, as it were, and really figure out what values I wanted to optimize my life on. And they are not, as I realized, about, you know, I mean, I always prefer more money than less, but
Right.
it's not so much about that. Exactly. And so I now substitute it with new variables. There's nothing more meaningful to me than writing and seeing my worth on a page at the end of a day. And then after a year or two, it turns into a book, you know, and that level of maximizing some sort of, I would say in this case, meaning or purpose, nothing else even comes close. And so, Scott, I'm totally curious, what variables do you optimize your life on, and how did you come to discover them?
Yeah, so I have one comment first on your point because I think it's so valuable and I'll answer that question. I love that question. I find it really interesting because I think what you did was, you know, so many people find themselves living a life that other people have shaped, and you're almost an actor or actress inside of your own life. And you wake up and you're like, wait a second, this isn't even who I want to be. This isn't even who
Exactly.
I've ever been. And I've spent a lot of time talking about this recently because when you have a family and you have kids and you have all these other outside um, variables, all these outside positives, people that love you, but they love you and know you for a role that you play. I'm the CEO at my company. I'm the father in our house. I mean, my sons will look at me completely different from someone that works with me, and someone that works with me will look at me completely different than someone I have a bourbon with after hours, and someone that I have a bourbon with after hours will look at me completely different from someone I'm helping their charity do something big. And and there's these roles that you fall into when you talk about writing. What you did, it's almost like you went inward so much that you found the way to truly center yourself. And when you're pleasing to yourself, when your internal mind is happy, when you're working and you're able to produce something, you have this liberation, this freedom. And does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that was exactly my experience. And just being able to tell myself, I actually don't care about these factors that other people with who put me in these roles that I have to them or have expectations of me. I don't care about the same factors they determine for me that I want to determine myself. And once I could even just acknowledge that to myself, it was so liberating. And I felt like I felt more powerful than ever, actually. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of like the American dream is attached to money for so many people. And when you realize the American dream has nothing to do with money, it has everything to do with being whatever you want to be, having the freedom to choose, having the freedom to choose if you want to live in a one room efficiency and have a big family, or have a huge house and go on vacations all the time. It's a choice. And the beauty is the freedom is in your choice, not the American dream of attaching it to money. And just like you, to answer your question, I spend way too much time optimizing. And I've gone through iterations in my life, in my career, where I just kind of wake up, um I call it waking up, but it's really just a self-reflection, and I evaluate what's most important. And I early on, I was a lifestyle financial advisor, is what I call it. I had a quality practice. I made really great money, more than I ever dreamed I would make. I also was coaching my boys in every soccer practice, and I was at every soccer practice, and I took off the month of July 2 consecutive years where my wife is a school teacher and the boys were out and we were all together as a family. And I would do work in the morning, or while they were doing their morning routines, but I pretty much had time to do whatever it was. And I remember thinking, this is optimizing life. This isn't just
Exactly.
optimizing money. And I was sacrificing money. I was 100% sacrificing money. And I remember when I started the wine festival, and we started, it was about 7 years, 8 years into my career. And I remember we gave $175,000 to charity, and all local. And I had a feeling like, I don't even like what I do every day. I'd rather do this. If I can
Mhm.
make this kind of impact, this is what I want to put more time and energy into. And I struggled with that for a little while, of trying to figure out how I could balance it. And I was like, I'll never be able to write a check for $175,000 myself. And then again, another iteration, I reshuffled, I rebalanced. And when I started the company that I did in 2016, I uh I told my family that we would have more freedom, that I was going to have more time and more energy and make my own choices. And and for the first couple years, I tried really hard, but it wasn't easy, and I wasn't really winning. And so I missed more soccer practices. I missed of the first couple games. I never missed a game, and I still almost never have missed games. But I started to prioritize things that were not as important to help us get to the next level, because now I'm responsible for all these other people. And I reshuffled again. And so I bring that up because the life model to me is how I actually optimize my life. And it's things like in the beginning of this year, I wrote down things I wanted to do more of with the people that I love the most, and little things like, my mom cooks every Sunday and I never go and I cook with her. I love to cook, but I don't cook with her. And I don't know that I have the patience to do it. I don't know if I can actually get in the kitchen and get in her space. I don't know, but it's something I wrote down that I want to do. And my mom listens to these, so she's probably going to now make it weird. But at the same time, um, I say that to you because I try to prioritize the beginning of the year what optimization looks like to life, not wealth. And
Yes.
dissecting the two of them has been the liberation that most people don't find.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And coming from that world of extreme wealth, I still have so many friends in that world of wealth. And I just know so many of them talk to me about how they're not happy at their jobs, but they don't know how to leave. And so I just, I think the journey of, as you were saying, separating the wealth mindset from the life mindset. And of course there can be some overlap, but also just to know that they're not one and the same, right? Just to separate that, I think is an incredibly internal personal journey for most people. And I think, I mean, I just love your podcast for this reason, to just be able to have these conversations, to realize, if someone is struggling with these questions, they're not alone. And it's just really hard to be able to determine really just your own path, and to what you were saying earlier about the American dream is actually about choice and not money. I just love that so much because my best friend from MIT, I not only love her as my best friend, but I respect her like so, so, so much. And she and I have a lot of conversations. And one of the recurring themes is about how when uh, she graduated from MIT and got a good professional degree in, I say in my book, big law, and she worked in big law. She got a law degree. And when she started having kids, she has a couple kids. She decided she wanted to stay at home for her kids. And she said she felt sort of a lot of judgment from other working women. And the judgment was almost like, why would you, have the career you had and the resume you had and give that all up to, Scott, you were also talking about like make less money, give up wealth.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like, first of all, being a mother is a really, really difficult, full-time, all consuming job, and she's a mother multiple times over, and she's choosing to do the thing that is absolutely most meaningful for her. So why can't her American dream be defined in her way of spending quality time with her kids and seeing her kids grow up? Like, I just don't understand why the way we define it has to be in this corporate way where, we just are trying to maximize not only wealth, but, say a LinkedIn, and why can't her decision to, at the time to like drop out of the workforce. But I have to say, being a mother is also a job. So I just, I don't believe in that notion at all. I think I'm kind of as you said earlier, out of the box there, but she has options and she may go back to work in some capacity in the future. And I think she's already looking into that now. So I just want everyone to kind of question, who are you really living your life for? And it's okay to just live your life on your own terms, but also I want us to be kinder to other people who may not be having the traditional path as well.
Yeah, well, be curious about your own path, and it's okay
Yes.
to ask questions and challenge it. And the other thing is, motherhood and fatherhood are going to pay significantly higher dividends in life if you
Yes.
invest properly. And so
Yes.
the thing is that, my wife and I are at a point where our oldest son is getting ready to go to college next year. Our youngest son is living away and playing in an academy for soccer. And I've talked about this in the podcast a lot. we're like in this like preemptive empty nest phase where we're
Mhm.
almost there. And it is extremely, the first word is the most powerful one. It's empty, because
Mm,
all of the things that you care about the most are that. And it's amazing the value that I find as I've gotten older. We do a Sunday dinner with my mom and dad every single weekend, and my siblings come over and their kids come over. And there's this when I'm out of town, I like to get into town by Sunday evening so I don't miss that thing, right? And when I was young, I thought it was the biggest waste of time. I'm like, come on, we just did it last week. Can I watch the football games this weekend? It's the Super Bowl, or it's the and now I'm like, hey, mom, what are we doing for the Super Bowl? Are we all getting together? It's just the prioritization changes as we get older. And I think there's nothing wrong with making that decision. I think the person that makes that decision and loves that decision, like your friend, and is supported by the people that love
yes.
her, are the ones that are that's also how you find your real who's, how you find your
Yes.
real humans. Arthur Brooks calls it real friends and deal friends. And I love it because anytime you've been in the world, from your boss that you worked with for those years, there are people that will do anything for him, but if they didn't work for him or they weren't in his work life, they wouldn't even talk to him. There's no
Exactly.
text that would come in. There's no one that would care that he got cancer, like, unless they're going to profit from it.
Yes.
And so that in itself is a realization. I like that. I like that that curiosity that you brought up is really what this conversation is about. It's about being curious about what you really want in a life and then going after it. And you decided to do that with 29. Is that the age that you made the decision to quit? Is that what I read?
29 is when I started this really intense
Okay,
job.
okay.
And so I ended up resigning, quitting that job when I was 31. And I gave myself one more year to get on a new track. And I wanted to do my MFA. It's what I wanted to do when I was 29 and I took this job. But even though I worked in finance, I still needed a day job to live in New York because I that's what I needed to make things work. And so I worked at a second hedge fund, also a huge one, for the founder for about 10 months until I got into my MFA program, and then I quit that world of high finance. And I just also think that from the time I dropped out of Wharton, hoping to change paths. I was 26, I think, at the time. And so from the time that I actually started my MFA, it was 7 years. And so I just also think change can take however long it takes. You don't have to rush it. I generally have I want to do things as fast as possible personality. And it comes from the intensity and wanting to optimize. But there are some things you just can't. And my therapist reminds me all the time, things will take as long as they take. And you can do everything. This is another line of phrase. You can do everything, just not all at the same time. And so I'm going down the list of doing things I care about. And I think it intersects with your philosophy of life so much. And to be able to just have an impact and bring about the energy that I want in the world, because the energy I had when I was burnt out was not fun to be around, both at work and at home. And that's not who I want to be.
Yeah, it's almost like if you think about a plug, right? When I plug the plug in and I get energy and the light comes on, or the
Yes.
stereo turns on, or the TV turns on, what we have to search for in our lives is we have to search for more of the things that give us energy, not the things that take the energy.
Yes.
We don't want to be the conductor only for other people. And if that's the case, then what happens is you get burnt out really, really quick, and you feel that emptiness in your life or your job or your career, and it's not really valuable. I think that I really try hard in a high intensity world. And I do have somebody that does like everything for me in my career. And she's amazing. And she does all my travel and she does all the things. She listens to the podcast. She tells me when they're great or when something's wrong, or like it's really, really powerful. She's not an assistant, she's a partner to work
Yes.
with. And I really want to be authentic and appreciative and care about their life and her family and the people. And I feel like that's a differentiator as well that I've focused really hard on. Is it's not just about life model for me, it's about a life model for the people in my life, that they want to actually be a part of it.
Mhm.
And if I'm giving enough, I will receive. So I have no problem being the conductor and being the energy for someone else, but it can't always only be that. And that's, I think, where people find themselves burn out. And that's what you were suggesting. And that's probably what drove you to write the book, right? I mean, it's just
Yes, yes. And also, it sounds like you are a wonderful, the way you think about your you said like more than assistant. She really helps. She's a partner in this mission of yours and this belief of life itself that sounds like you are a wonderful manager and boss. And I
most of
yes.
the time, I think there are times where I'm not the best, but she gets temper tantrums, and like when you can say things that you can't say to other people,
Yes.
there is a level of rawness that comes out, and you're grateful that you have someone like that. But if you think about it, and listeners, I want you to really think about this. You have so little people, and most people have so few people in their lives that they trust so much to just be all of themselves.
Yeah.
And I am that with my family, sometimes to a fault, but I am also that way with the people that are closest to me at work. And that means that, maybe it's only 10% of negative and 90% positive. Maybe it's 80-20. But the reality is there's always going to be some ebb and flow. And most of the time I just try to err on the side of positive over negative, substantially positive.
Right, right. And same. My boss in the book calls me an eternal optimist. I want to believe in the best in people and not just want, I do, but I do think it's important to think about, the whatever 5-10% negative, how you act and behave and tackle those moments, I think are really formative and defining for a personal and work relationship. There are so, when I tried to speak up to my boss in the book about being burnt out, I respect him so much. I think he's so smart and he valued me by giving me raises and bonuses and really just so many gifts. But when I really spoke up for what I wanted to change at work, and this was just me asking for help after being burnt out for 2 years, I could even see him trying in front of me, but he just didn't believe that I was that burnt out. And so how do you get across to somebody that you are, in an emergency situation, you can't make it, and you just need more support and more help? It just ends up being really difficult. And so more than anything in my book, I think my heart kind of broke in those moments because I could see him wanting to understand my life and wanting to understand how much I was trying. But at the same time, he just I think didn't believe my burnout or didn't think I was
Maybe it
working
was just
that
this,
hard.
maybe it was just disconnection.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a life that just gets disconnected, and the more disconnected you are from the source, from the thing that is, when you're running a company of that size and you're that successful, you're writing a new story, and that story is not just you, it's everybody else he's responsible for. And so sometimes he's trying to weigh that. And I feel like the more successful one becomes, the more disconnected they get. And it's funny, I'm around a lot of high performers, and people will say things like, well, do you they'll ask questions like, well, I mean, they'll say, I want to be a billionaire, or I'm looking to be, and I have zero interest in that. I mean, zero. This is a hobby of mine. I mean, like this podcast is something I enjoy so much that I prioritize it in my week. I make sure that I have time. I study the guests. I love doing this. That's what I want more of. And and if you do more of that in your life, and I guarantee you're going to find the book is going to do the same thing, the more you put yourself, your true self into something, the more dividends it will pay. And it might not pay billionaire dividends in dollars, but it'll pay billionaire dividends in life, in true, impact and the things that matter. And I think that's what you were discovering. And unfortunately, he probably wanted to, like you said, he
Yes.
wanted to get there. He's just so disconnected. And it's almost like there's a paradigm shift, right? I've managed money for 21 years. And here's an interesting dynamic. New money is stuff. Like when you first start making money, the American dream, as we talked about, what it isn't, is people like, oh, if I only made six figures, I could have this. And
Mhm.
then they buy it when they do it. And then they realize they need more. So if I can only have a boat, and then they get a boat. Now they never drive the boat and they feel guilty they never ride the boat. And then they accumulate stuff. Then they hit a level where they feel a financial freedom. They have enough to do the things they want to do. Their kids' college is paid for. Their spouse is staying at home, taking care of the kids and living the life they choose to live. Like there's a level. And what you'll find for the people that truly hit that life empowerment where they get it is they start to shed stuff. They actually start to live simpler. They still prioritize things like time. So they might still fly first class because they can, but they're also at the front of the plane. They spend an hour less in lines. They have TSA pre or global entry, or they're not going to go backwards in what they learned, but they're shedding stuff for experiences and with the people they love the most. And you see this paradigm shift. I think there's a second one though. And the second one is when you don't ever actually start to shed stuff. You just keep packing it on. And then it's always even your friends or friends that are friends with you just because you're the only people that make that much money together. Or I mean, it's just, I
Mm.
feel like that's one of the shifts. And I've seen this from people that, are school teachers and police officers to people that own multi-million dollar companies. And not everybody gets it. Some people are always chasing money, but you'll never catch it.
That's Scott. May I ask you then, in your life, how do you then try to deal with disconnection if and when you sense it? And how do you try to reconnect with those around you?
So the first thing that I've talked about a lot, and I've done it in my 40s, that something I probably didn't talk about is my faith has become something super important to me. And so I start every day slow now. And I start off by listening or reading scripture. I go for a walk with the dog, or I work out and do my sauna. And I really go inward, which is something I spent very little time doing early in my life, in my career. I'm a better human when I do that, right? The other thing is, I try to take money out of the decision-making process. I actually am turned off by it most of the time. I struggle, and I live in a world with money. My company manages money. Like my employees do this for a living. And when the conversation shifts to money, I understand profit. I understand maximizing and optimizing, and I do well enough at those things to help. Personally, though, I find that generosity is something that kind of centers me. And
Mhm.
so when I start to feel like I'm getting too engaged or involved in something that's money related or moving me in the wrong direction, I'm often generous.
Mhm.
And I use little like tricks that I've made up in my own brain. I'm super disciplined, so I have to like create games that I live like when I'm in church sometimes. I have an automatic thing that I send the church every week, right? But I still, when the basket comes around, I take whatever bill is there on the front end and I put it in. I don't care what it is. And my kids watch me do this. And I do that because I'm like, hey, it always comes back. If there's somebody that needs something and I see someone that's homeless and I feel like I need to help them, I'm going to give them something, regardless of what the dollar amount is, I'm going to do it. And it makes me reframe my brain that money is not the answer and that I've always found a way to make money. So I say that because I think that's one of the challenges. If I'm taking that chasing the dollar away, I have to almost give it away to realize it's not mine. I'm just blessed that it continues to come in because I do what I love and something good comes out of it. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that is the and then that with the life model of just reshuffling and recentering. And there are still times that I say, gosh, I wish we would have done this. I mean, anytime you fly, if you've ever flown private, you hate flying any other way.
Oh,
And
yeah. I
I've
mean,
only
yeah,
done it a
yeah,
couple of times, and
yeah,
I still to this day, every time we fly, I'm like, oh my gosh, this hassle. Why do they treat you so bad? And
yeah,
I want to change the whole model. And
yeah.
so there's still times I want more. I don't want people to think that's not real, but I also I try to recenter myself on a regular basis and not to look like a good guy, but to
Hmm.
feel like the person I know I am.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that resonates.
Oh, yeah, it resonates totally. And speaking of flying private, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a major plot line in my book, but it's definitely sort of a thing in my book because certainly the global entry story, but also I have flown private quite a few times, and mostly not through work, but my relationship in the book, my partner at the time comes from fairly extreme wealth as well, and his family had a private jet, and we would fly to their multiple homes. Um, and it just the convenience of being able to show up somewhere 1 minute before, you know,
It's
take
unreal.
off and just get on and, versus the multiple hours getting to an airport well before, who knows how long the lines are, even if you have all the conveniences like Clear or
Yeah.
Global Entry, TSA PreCheck, it's still, even if you're first class, it's still multiple hours. And so, yeah, flying private does save, I mean, hours and hours for every leg of the trip. And it's just, and I walked away from all of that. I end the book single by choice. I had to leave him, and he also to me symbolized that world of wealth that I think he actually felt stuck in as well. I wanted him to leave that world together with me, and I wanted us to just Scott, to use one of your terms, kind of just recalibrate, reset, just rebalance my life. Like you would rebalance your portfolio every so
Yeah.
often. You need to rebalance your life decisions. And again, I say it's a personal decision because for whatever reason, I mean, it's a huge one. He comes from extreme wealth. He just did not want to leave that world behind. And I did. And so I really resonate with your message of not choosing to center money and wealth, but all these other areas of life that are meaningful to you. And I also think about how difficult it is to know exactly what is meaningful to you. Like in my early 20s, I had no idea. So I just assumed, oh, what made other people happy would also make me happy because I just didn't have that self-understanding yet. And it took me years to build that. But as you say, it comes from self-curiosity and really curiosity about the world. And I think we can all use more of that.
Yeah, you know what's funny is sometimes I just think it's good to recenter the intensity we talked about in the beginning of the discussion, where we talked about that high intensity and how we want to make everything better and how we want to really optimize everything. Well, if you center that on yourself and you actually try harder to actually make this better, you better. It's the only thing we can control. And there are
Yes.
still things I work on every single day and things that I want to get better, but it's a personal decision. And it's a personal decision that will affect the who's in my life, the impact I make, the faith I provide, and the energy of how I show up. It's actually a part of that. And I think that's what that's what we find. And I've heard you mention an interview about writing the book, and I think it's really good for people to understand this. It's kind of cathartic, isn't it? Like it was therapy to write this book. You had to go back, you had to research, you had to remember stories, you put yourself back in that moment, and you feel something that maybe you didn't feel at all at the time because you were numb.
Yes,
You know, it's so
yes,
interesting, right? Did you
yes.
feel cathartic and almost like it was a therapy session? Did you find yourself going through like mood swings as you wrote the book or edited the book?
It's as you, yes, absolutely. I think it was both extremely cathartic and extremely difficult. And I just believe in that and because it can be both, you know, and I think that sometimes in people who, I mean, I've seen it because I am sort of obsessed with high performance and how do we get the most out of our days. And I think sometimes that can lead to, you know, if you, instead of looking backward, it's always looking forward. How can we improve and how can we do better? I mean, I think that is wonderful to think about how to improve and how to do better and how to make something uh just like more optimal. However, the flip side of that is if you focus too much on the future orientation, you know, there's a whole your past self that will help you access that better future. But I think you need to go back to it from time to time and really understand what happened. And for me, the 2 years, 2.5 years I write about in the book, during it, I absolutely did not know what was happening to me. I could not even tell you. I mean, I told my therapist actually I was not burnt out. I didn't really feel, I just like, I was so burnt out that I said I wasn't burnt out. You know, that tells you how bad it was.
Yeah.
And for several years after going back to it, you know, I was like, I don't know what happened to me actually. And just to be able to go back to your former self, kind of really confront who you were. And this is a just a nod, an allusion to Joan Didion, but to be able to be on nodding terms with my former self. You know, I still cringe at myself at certain times, but I understand that that was who I needed to be who I am today, and to not be so negative on my past self and to really kind of control the self-criticism and self-blame, which can lead to sometimes certainly for me, but I understand people with sort of this just love of optimization. It can send, it certainly sent me down a spiral when I wasn't being when I wasn't able to be as perfect or as optimal as I wanted to be. And so to quiet that, some of that intense self-criticism that can come when you're not actually where you want to be yet. Because I think if you're not where you want to be yet, I think that's a beautiful thing because I think that just shows you how much room there is to grow and something to look forward to in the future. But I also think that that future comes from actually confronting your past self. And that's what I did in the book. And yes, it was uncomfortable at times. It was also cathartic, but it was also so meaningful and so beautiful. I laughed, I cried, and I tried to put it all on the page and to be as honest with readers as I wanted to be with myself, which is a difficult thing because I think we contain multitudes and it's not all pretty all the time.
Yeah, you know, I tell myself all the time that if I spend too much time in the past, you can get really caught up in depression, right? You can
Yes,
get upset. If you spend too much time in the future, you get anxious
yes,
because you're awaiting. But if the right space is the present, and anybody that's a visionary or working super hard for the future has to focus so hard on the present moment. And that really is the way that you combat it. It's just it's sheer presence. And it's probably with age, it helps. It definitely helps with age because it's perspective. And to your point about the version of you, version 1.0 or 2.0 that isn't that person anymore. I completely agree. I mean, I married fairly young, but if I didn't have the failed relationships I had as a young man and the absolute, version of me that I did not want to be into the future, and then have someone who's worked with me to get better in all those ways, and vice versa. You know, we're working together to raise our kids to be better. And, you know, there's lots of moments, these versions of us. I want to be judged by who I'm aiming to be and where
Yes.
I'm at right now, not who I was 20 years ago. And nowhere's faster than that when you're sitting at a dinner table with your whole family and they know your whole story. And you know, someone's like, "Well, you know, you do this," and I do it. I know I've done it to my sister. I know I've done it to my brother, and so we have to be careful to look at people the same way. But it is a challenge. It is definitely a challenge. And I know that, to your point about the book, when I wrote my book, I found myself in like this deep, deep thought. And when
Mhm.
I edited it and I heard words that I had written or said, and they came out in a way that I didn't like and I didn't actually think. So sometimes I would respond in a way where I'm writing something and I would notice that what I put on the page wasn't actually what I felt. It was what came
Mm.
out in a reactionary moment. And then I was able to reframe it and put it closer to who I am today. But I would get so close to who I was at that moment that it was important to write it in the terms of where we are now, not where we were. You have to understand as the reader where I was, but you have to understand how far we came. And that's what your book is about.
Yes, exactly. It's fundamentally a story of personal transformation and self-discovery. So I made the decision very early on to, I mean, it's somewhat of a risky one, but to make the reader actually smarter than the character in the book. Because, it had been many, many years, and I didn't want to write a book that was just my wisdom of how to be, your true self. I think there are wonderful books that do that. I really wanted my book to be one woman's journey of professional sort of self-realization and coming of age, and to just, but also more than that. It's primarily set at work, but it's so much more than that. Um, that I think the realization, that journey of my mindset, I wanted to capture on the page. And it means at the beginning, I wasn't who I wanted to be yet, to your point. And I want to be judged for who I'm aiming to be and who I perhaps hopefully arrived at the end of the book, or certainly now, and I was and continue to be imperfect, but I try. And I think that trying is what matters.
Well, and you even made decisions around who you surrounded yourself with to allow yourself to get to a closer version of who you wanted to be. And that's the hardest thing. People struggle with that all through their lives because sometimes their own families are the ones that are holding them back and making them unable to get where they want to be. And so your message resonates with listeners. I know it does. I know people are listening to this and they're saying, I get this. I felt this, or I need to do something about this. And I think grabbing your book is the best way to better understand your story. And for those that do read the book, um, where are you heading? Where's this version? What's coming next? So I know that you just released the book, and I know that right now the only thing that's important is this tornado effect of making sure. By the way, releasing a book, folks, is one of the loneliest things in the world. You are so responsible for getting, hey, can you write a review? Can you do this? Like, you're asking people things that you're super uncomfortable with. And you really need their help, because if this thing doesn't, like, you have to like get it legs and then it can move, but it has to get legs. And so you have a great team. Obviously you put together a great product, but what's next? Let's end this conversation there so people can kind of look forward to seeing what you're going to accomplish in the future and where your focus is.
My focus is that I want to continue writing books. I love books. I want to continue writing narrative nonfiction, compelling true stories that explore what it means to be alive, all these complex issues having to deal with um, just society and capitalism and work, but also the personal side of all these equations. And in particular, I'm just kind of obsessed with how we end up who we are. I am really interested in uh, niche topics that are actually somewhat universal. And I just love really, really compelling true stories. And I hope to be able to capture so many more in my future books. And in my book, it is a memoir, so I think I'm probably the main character, but my book is alive with many other characters, including my boss, my former relationship, my parents, my best friends, all of whom were struggling to, understand who they were and what they wanted out of life. I think everyone was. And so I'm not sure exactly which direction my next book will be in, but I know it will have the same themes of exploring what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, working, breathing, loving, living life in the 21st century.
That's great. And this is the book for those of us watching. It's Private Equity by Carrie Sun, a memoir. And it's been great getting to know you, getting to know your story, and just having a really fun conversation. And and I think your authenticity shines through. So we look forward to seeing more of what you create in some of these conversations. And where do they find you? If the listener wants to find you, you have a website. I know they can buy the book on any major Amazon or anything, right?
Right. And about my website is just my name, carriesun.com. And I've also just very recently started Instagram, and that's Carrie, my middle name, Y-I-E Sun, Carrie E Sun.
Okay, great. Well, we'll be on the lookout for all the cool stuff that's coming. Carrie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I loved our conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.